The Bible said men there, right? Well, the Bible, that's how they talked in those days. But when they said 5,000 men, that means there was probably 5,000 women. That's a lot of people, isn't it? That's just, I mean, I don't know how many churches of people plus kids. Probably 20,000 kids, and Jesus spoke to them all day. And this is the people on the hillside here. And this is kind of their heads a little bit. See, we're having fun, right? Doesn't really like people, but that's what they are. Anyway, they were there all day. And you know what happens when you're there all day and you don't have anything to eat or drink? You get hungry. I mean, all day long. And one of the disciples looked at Jesus and said, we should send these people away because they got to be hungry and thirsty by now. And you know what Jesus said? Jesus said to the disciple, you go feed them. And he's like, what are we going to eat? It's going to cost us a fortune to try to get food to feed all these people. And one of the disciples went up to Jesus because he had faith in Jesus. He said, Jesus, here's a boy, a 10-year-old boy. There's no one 10 years old in here, is there? A 10-year-old boy who had 2 fish and 5 little loaves of bread. And he went up to Jesus with little faith and said, Jesus, we have this, but this is not enough for everybody. And Jesus did something. He said, gather everybody into groups. And he prayed to God about the food. And you know what? Everyone got fed. That's amazing, isn't it? You know what that's called? When something like that happens? A miracle. Now that, a miracle, is not like a trick. Making yellow letters out of black paint and Miss Connie's Bible, those are tricks. Those aren't really real. They're just, your eyes can deceive you, but this was a miracle. This is true. This was amazing, but you know, the reason why Jesus could do that, and I'll show you right now. Because he was the Lord. You know what Lord means? Lord means he is the biggest ruler of all. In fact, Jesus made everything. Everything was made by him. This was not too hard for Jesus because he was Lord. He could do miracles. And right after this happened, did anybody know the story? What happened after that? What's that? Well, yeah, he did die on the cross. But that's a really good answer. That's a very, very good answer. But that, I'm going to talk about that later. What happened was Jesus told his disciples to get in the boat. This is like his disciples, kind of. Get in the boat and go to the other side of the lake. And he stayed there. And he prayed up in the mountains. And so these disciples, most of them were fishermen, so they were used to boats. But all of a sudden, a big storm came up. Can you believe Jesus would send his people out when there's going to be a storm? But he did. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden, all these waves are crashing, and the disciples were afraid. They were really afraid, and these guys were used to storms. Anyway, all of a sudden, the disciples looked out in the boat, and they were really scared and really tired. And what they say? They said it's a ghost! The disciples were like, it's a ghost. But you know what it was? It was Jesus walking on water, wasn't it? You remember the story? Have you read the story before? Yes. And that is a miracle because Jesus is Lord. He's able to do things like that. He walked on water. He walked out to them. He allowed them to be in the storm. And he walked out in the water. And you know Simon Peter, the one that always talked a lot? Simon Peter had great faith. And Simon Peter told Jesus, Lord, if that is you, command me to come out and walk out to you. And Jesus said this. Come. And Jesus says that to us too. When we talk to Jesus, he will say, come, and we need to be obedient. And Peter was obedient, and he came out, he walked on the water. Now Jesus, we probably won't be walking on water, but Jesus can call to all of us. And Peter started walking out in the water, and you know what happened to Peter? Does anybody remember that? Okay, what happened? He started to sink, didn't he? He started to sink because he took his eyes off of Jesus. He started to doubt. And because of that, he started to go down in the water. Like this. And it wasn't good. And so what did Peter say? He said this. And this matters to us too. Lord, save me. Jesus, when Jesus calls to you, when he tells you to come, and all you have to do is save me, Lord. Tell him to save you, and he will. Him and Peter went back on the boat, and they went to the other side of the shore. Now, the biggest miracle of them all is what Jesus did, and you talked about it earlier, didn't you? But Jesus did come, and he died on a cross, but the reason for that is this. Because there's something that separates us from God. You guys know what that is? Sin. That's kind of a weird end, isn't it? Sin. You guys know what sin is? Anyone ever told you what sin is? What's sin? When you lie. You know, God gives us a conscience. That way we know that it's not right to lie, to steal, to not be obedient to our parents and things like that. But those things are very serious to God. God hates those things. He really does. Those things are called sin. They provide a barrier between us and God. But God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever should believe in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. Jesus took the penalty we deserve because God hates those things so much. And you've heard the story about the nails. The nails in his hands and feet. It was really costly for Jesus. He loved you so much that he would do that. Because God had to do that because he hates those things. But Jesus came and died and took what we deserve. That's the biggest miracle of all, is that Jesus died on the cross, was buried for 3 days, and what's the biggest miracle of them all? Who hasn't said anything? Okay, way over there. What happened? Yes? That is the biggest miracle of them all. And that proves that Jesus is Lord, that he is in charge of miracles, that he can do all of this. And when he calls you to come, you be obedient and tell him to save you. And he can do it. He rose from the dead. All you need to do is tell Jesus to save you and do this. Turn and trust. You can try to be good, but you can never be good enough. You just need to turn. The Bible says that we're walking a certain way without Jesus, and we need to say, you know what, we're going the wrong way. And we need to turn towards Jesus. When he says, come, we turn toward him. And he says that to all of us. And we just trust him, as Peter did. And when he took his eyes off him, he went down. But we must turn and trust him. We'll receive that forgiveness that Jesus paid for on the cross, okay? That's the biggest miracle of them all. That's the best news of them all, right?